I'm Mario Fraioli. I coach a wide range of athletes from middle distance runners all the way to ultra marathoners. I also write the Morning Shakeout email newsletter, which comes out every Tuesday morning, and host the occasional podcast of the same name. And I still compete as an athlete. I race everything from the mile to the marathon.
Mario, tell us a little bit about your background in track running. When did you first start doing track and what distances?
I started running track in high school, and originally I started running cross country to keep in shape for basketball, and found some success in distance running, and eventually gave up basketball and joined the track team. And from the very beginning, the mile was my favorite event in track and field, and now 26 years later, it's still my favorite event in track and field, and I'm racing on the Masters circuit at 42 years old, but I've run every distance from really like the 100 meters on up to, on the track, 5,000 meters.
Fantastic. What's your mile PB?
My 1 mile PB is 409.77.
Wow. When did you do that?
I did that in 2004.
Cool. And I know that you raced it. Was it an indoor mile you raced not long ago?
In 2023, I raced an indoor mile in Boston and ran 4:30 flat.
Awesome. Where did that place you?
That placed me second in that particular race, yes.
Let's talk about training on the track. You've got the classic high school collegiate track running background, so you're very comfortable and familiar with track running. What about runners that do ultras, that do marathons, that are triathletes, that have come into running a little bit later or haven't had track experience? What can they potentially gain from training on the track?
It doesn't matter what distance you're training for, what discipline that you're focusing on. Getting onto the track with some regularity can benefit you in a lot of ways, even if you're not racing on the track, especially if you're not racing on the track. I mean, there are no lies inside these white lines. I mean, it's a 400-meter oval, whether you're here in California or you head over to the UK, and it's a great opportunity for you to work on speed, to dial in your pacing, to learn discipline, because you get that constant feedback every 200 meters. There's also nowhere to hide out there. You can't fake your way through it. You know, the truth is going to be told no matter, you know, who you are, what you're training for.
Clearly there's a whole bunch of different type of sessions you can do on a track. What kind of sessions might you recommend for people who are probably predominantly running longer distances in their races and who are new to track running?
So that's a good question, because a lot of people, when they think of the track, they think pure speed. I'm going to go and I'm going to rip off a bunch of sprints. And you certainly can do that, and there is benefit for distance runners in doing that from time to time. But you can run medium length intervals, you can run longer intervals. You could do 400-meter repeats, which is 1 lap repeats of the track. That's a pretty classic session. You could do 800-meter repeats, slow it down a little bit. You could stretch it out to 1Ks or 2Ks or even 3K type of repeats and just really nail down that pacing and get into a rhythm. I think of it as not too different than going into a pool. I mean, you can go into a pool and you could sprint 25 meters from one end to the other, or turn around, do a 50 super fast, but you could also go for 1,500 meters and just be going for 20 minutes. You can do all of that stuff on the track.
What's the sweet spot kind of range of rep distances that are going to benefit most of the more endurance focused athletes on the track?
I think those middle range reps are going to benefit people the most. So for me, that's anywhere from 800 meters to about 2K. And you could mix that up as well. You could do 800 at a slightly faster pace, 200 at more of a tempo, 800 at a slightly faster pace, 2K at more of a tempo. That's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck, because those reps, they're not all out in terms of speed, but they are high effort and they take a lot of focus. And I think that's one of the real benefits of the track, is it really forces you to focus lap after lap on your pacing, your effort, how those two things are correlating. So a lot of those mid-distance reps are going to help you to achieve that end.
When I was training as a triathlete pretty seriously, I had a running coach who was a running specialist, And when I look back at the kind of sessions he used to give me to do on a track, it usually ended up with me doing somewhere between about 4 and 6K of work with a warm up and a cool down. So I'd often end up running like 10, 12 kilometers in a session. Do you have any kind of ratio as to what you typically work to to get the most out of these sessions?
It depends on the type of workout. If we're doing shorter, faster reps, typically we'll top out at 5K of total work, not counting the warm up and cool down. If we're doing some of those longer, stronger reps, we'll usually be between like 5 and 8K. Sometimes I'll go up to 10K for my more advanced runners, but I find doing more laps than that on the track, the risk outweighs the reward just from the repetitive stress on the body, because you are going in the same direction and just constantly turning over and over and over again.
Yeah, that makes sense. I appreciate there's different ways to layer on training stress. So one of them is to run faster. Another one is to reduce rest intervals between reps and things. But what kind of relationship between work and recovery do you put into a typical track session?
To really dumb it down, the shorter, faster, more intense the intervals, typically the longer the recovery is going to be. The longer, stronger the intervals, more threshold type of work, the shorter that rest is going to be. I think of the longer threshold types of reps is if you were to go out and do a 20-minute tempo run without any recovery. Here we can get on the track and maybe break those into 1K repeats or 5-minute repeats and take a 45-second rest just to reset in between. So typically the longer and less intense the intervals, the shorter the recovery. The shorter, more intense the intervals, the longer the recovery. That might be 1 to 2 work to rest ratio for some of those shorter reps, but on the flip side, it could be a 3 to 1 work to rest ratio for the longer reps.
And then at the extremes, I guess, when I was training on the track back at university, I remember seeing the sprinters who would appear to spend most of their time at the track sat on the steps and then occasionally get up and do something very high intensity.
If you watch a sprinter's workout, it's really interesting because it takes longer than a distance runner's workout, but they're doing far less actual work if you were to total up the volume, but they take a lot more recovery between their repetitions just because the intensity is so high. So they may rip off a 200-meter repeat and take 5 minutes recovery. So they'll run for the really fast ones 25 seconds maybe, and then they'll take 5 minutes of recovery, but that's because the intensity is so high. But they're trying to achieve something different than we as distance runners are trying to achieve.
On the track, obviously for racing on the track, everyone wears spikes and sprinters have certain type of spikes, distance runners have a different type of spike. Do you need to wear spikes though to run on a track?
You absolutely do not need to wear spikes if you are training on the track. If you're racing, yes, you want to familiarize yourself with that feeling and understand what the rhythm feels like when you're running at those race paces. But for those of us who are going to race off of the track on the roads, usually you want to wear your race shoes on the track. I think that's a good way to replicate some of the conditions that you will encounter on race day. I always recommend that folks wear a lightweight, flexible shoe on the track. Again, there's a lot of repetition, and I think having something lighter weight underneath your feet is going to be more beneficial when you're on the track and you're running faster, and mechanically you're a little bit more efficient, but absolutely do not need to wear spikes for training on the track.
That should be reassuring to people who are novices who think they're going to turn up for their track work and get laughed at because they haven't got the right gear.
Yeah, and even initially, if you're someone who's new to track or you don't train on it all that often, you can just wear your regular trainers. That's absolutely fine too. But I think if you're trying to get a little bit more out of your speed workout, wearing a lighter, more flexible shoe, or your race shoe, just something that makes that switch flip in your brain that, hey, I'm here to run fast, because there is a psychological component to it as well, and I think that's important with what's on your feet.
Talk to us about track etiquette. If you're training on a busy track with a lot of other people, what are the rules of the road?
Typically on a track, the traditional direction is counterclockwise, so you're making left turns. And if you show up to a track where there is a large group of people training, or just a wide variety of people training, usually they're going to be going in the same direction. So I think you want to make sure that you're going with the flow of the track. When I'm at the track by myself, if there aren't other people there, just for repetition's sake, sometimes I'll go in the opposite direction, but that's only if we're the only ones there, because then we're not causing any trouble. So typically you're going to be taking left turns and going counterclockwise. Usually the faster runners will run on the inside. It's 400 meters from dot to dot, no matter where you start or finish on the track. In those outer lanes, you're actually running further than 400 meters, and a lot of tracks can tell you, where that start and stop point is going to be, but usually reserve the inside lanes for the faster people. When you are passing, if you're going around someone who's slower and they happen to be on the inside, I usually say on your right, so you're going to pass them. They're going to be on your left, but you're passing them on the right. So you say on the right, and they'll stay in their line, and you're going to go around them. It's not good etiquette to pass someone on the inside. They're usually not expecting that. It can throw them off of their rhythm. So I think you want to be careful about that as well. And then when you're exiting the track, I think it's important when you stop your interval to look in both directions. If you're going to go off to the inside, you're going to go off to the outside, that you don't cause a traffic jam or a collision. So I think it's important to just recognize, have some awareness of what's happening around you so that you can step off cleanly.
I was always told as well not to run across the infield when the javeliners were practicing, which always seemed like sound advice.
That is sound advice. You don't want to be speared by a javelin while you're running around the track.
Let's talk about what we do, fueling and hydration. Track running is higher intensity in general, and we know that you need to be well hydrated and well fueled with carbs when you are trying to push out hard training. So what's your approach to fueling and hydrating during a track workout?
Yeah, there are a lot of runners and triathletes who will only fuel during those longer, more endurance-based sessions, the long runs. And I think it's equally, if not more important, to be fueling during these higher intensity sessions. So every time that I go to the track, or I have athletes at the track, I recommend that they take a bottle with them so that they can hydrate in between their intervals. Sometimes that's only water, and that's okay, or maybe an electrolyte solution, but sometimes it can be a carb drink as well, because that's an easy way to get carbohydrate into your system. Your body can absorb it while you're running at these higher intensities, and your stomach may be a little bit more sensitive. And or take a gel to the track as well. I always have one in my back pocket when I'm here at the track, and I'll take a gel usually between intervals, like while I'm recovering, or even half a gel sometimes. I might not take one down all at once, but I think it's important that you are, constantly putting carbohydrate into your system when you're burning so hot like that.
Mario, given that it's a relatively high intensity session, what kind of sort of pre-fueling or strategy do you use, or how do you eat before you come to the track?
Since it is a higher intensity session, I think you want to make sure, number one, that you give yourself time before you get to the track. So time to wake up, time to loosen your body up, just because you are going to be pushing so hard, and also giving yourself enough time to eat. I like to have about 2 hours before I go to the track, where I'll have a small breakfast that is mostly carbohydrate, easily digestible carbohydrate, along with an adequate amount of hydration, depending how warm it's going to be that day, so that I've got something to top off the tank, before I go to the track. But it's nothing that's going to be too heavy. For me, that might be a couple pieces of toast with some butter on it. I'll use some Precision Fuel in addition to just like my coffee in the morning as well. And for me, that tops off my carbohydrate stores and sets me up well for a solid workout.
When you get to the track, what's a good warm-up routine for a typical distance runner's session? How far do you need to run? How fast do you need to do strides?
So typically, the more intense the workout, the more comprehensive the warm-up is going to be. So if you know you're going to go to the track and be running some fast 400s, say, I think you want to get a really thorough warm-up. For me, that's usually 20 minutes of easy jogging to progressively faster running, and then we'll do a set of strides, which is not all out sprints, but it's just some faster 20-second accelerations to really just like get your legs turning over a little bit and kind of wake up your body, prime the pump, so to speak, before you do the main session. If you're going to be doing a longer workout where the volume of the actual workout is going to be high, you're doing 8 to 10K worth of work, which is more for the advanced runners. You still want to get a good warm-up in, but I don't think it needs to be quite as long as if you're doing those faster, more intense intervals. Still want to do some strides to get your legs turning over, but it doesn't have to be quite as thorough as for a shorter workout.
Mario, let's talk through 3 sample workouts. What's a good typical sample workout for a 10K half marathon runner to use?
A good bread and butter workout for road runner, especially if you don't have much experience training on the track, is a set of 400-meter repeats. I like to do them in groups of 4. So we might do anywhere from 8 to 12 to 16 to even 20 repetitions of 400 meters, which is 1 lap of the track. And we'll typically do that at 5K or 10K pace. So we're taking a pace that we can run for 5K or 10K and breaking it into much smaller chunks. Usually in those sets of 4, we'll do shorter recovery, somewhere in the range of 30 to 60 seconds, and then a longer recovery in between sets. So we're building up a good amount of volume at a higher intensity, but in much more manageable chunks. If you're doing that and focusing on half marathon, marathon type of distance. It's going to help with your speed, it's going to help with your efficiency. When you start doing those workouts that are more specific to those events, the tempo runs, the long runs, you're going to feel a big difference.
And what about a sample workout for sort of much longer distance? So let's talk about Ironman athletes and maybe ultra runners, that kind of stuff, people whose race pace is typically significantly slower.
I think doing a good chunk of work at threshold type of intensity, so just to make that easy to understand, that's half marathon pace, maybe a little bit quicker than that, all the way up to marathon pace, and doing 1,000-meter reps, 2,000-meter reps, even 3,000-meter reps on the track, just so you can really control that intensity, kind of keep an eye on how things are changing from lap to lap with a shorter recovery. So that might be 10 by 1,000 meters, might be 5 by 2,000 meters, might be 3 to 4 by 3,000 meters, with 2-minute recovery in between, so you can really control that intensity. If you're doing a good chunk of work at that type of pace, when you go to run a marathon or you go to run an Ironman marathon or you're running an ultra, that's again really going to help with your speed and efficiency.
Mario Fraioli's all-time favorite track workout?
If I could only do one track workout, it would be 800-meter repeats, and that could be anywhere from 6 to 12 repetitions. I personally like to get into that double-digit range because I think psychologically that's something you have to work through the entire workout, and I keep those at around 10K effort, or at least 10K effort to start, and if feeling pretty good, you can get faster toward the end. But that's 2 laps of the track, and I find mentally that makes it a little bit more challenging because anyone can run 1 lap, but you come around that first lap and you're holding on for 1 more lap. I think it really does something for you to be able to say, I've got to hold on here to this pace for a little bit longer. Then you get a short recovery, typically about 2 minutes in between, and just let those reps add up. So you can't really fake your way through a solid set of 800-meter reps. So for me, whether I was training for 5K or the marathon, I would go with 800-meter repeats.